Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. We're going to hear further evidence from people who were inside the tower at the time of the fire. Yes, Mr. Willett.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My next witness is Mr. Farhad Neda. Can I please call Mr. Neda?
I swear by Allah.
I swear by Allah
That the evidence I shall give.
that the evidence I shall give
Shall be the truth.
shall be the truth,
The whole truth.
the whole truth,
And nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Sit down if you like and make yourself comfortable there.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, Mr. Willett.
Good morning, Mr. Neda.
Good morning.
Can I start by asking you please to give the Chairman your full name?
My name is Farhad Neda.
And I think your first name is Shekab, but you are known as Farhad.
Yes, that's correct.
Can I start by thanking you very much indeed for coming today to give evidence to the inquiry and assisting the Chairman in his investigations. We really appreciate it, and it's enormously useful to us to have you here, so thank you very much. I appreciate that going through some of the events of the night may be difficult for you at times, so at any stage that you want a break, just say, and we can take a break. I'm going to ask questions in chunks of 45 minutes, so at 45 minutes, subject to the Chairman, we will stop and we can have a break.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. I should just also say something else. At times, when you're answering, it may be that it looks like I'm not listening to you because I'm not looking at you, but I'm looking at my screen or my notes. I am listening very hard to what you're telling us. It's just that I have to keep following it on the screen. So just so you understand.
No problem.
Okay. Can I start then by asking you please to look at your first statement, which is IWS quintuple 0886. Is this page 1 of your first statement?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, if you go to the last page, which is page 29, you can see a signature. Is that your signature?
Yes.
And it's over the date 6th of June 2017. Should that be 2018?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you. And have you had an opportunity to read this statement recently?
Yes, I've gone through it.
You have. And can you confirm that its contents are true?
Yes.
Thank you. There are no exhibits to this statement, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Neda, I think you've also produced a second witness statement to the inquiry dated the 16th of October 2018, 2 days ago, and that is at IWS quintuple 0113. If we can just have that up on the screen, please. No, that's not it. The reference I've got is 113.
No, that's not his.
That's not the right statement, I'm afraid. It's 113. IWS quintuple 0113.
Now I think you've got all your statements in a bundle there, if you prefer to use that.
Okay, thank you.
What's the address?
No, we've got a problem, I'm afraid, Mr. Willett.
It may be 1134.
Right. Well, should we try 1134? I'm grateful to Mr. Friedman. But I'm saying Flora. There we are. 1134.
Good. Thank you.
And can I ask you please to turn to page 3 of that statement? Is that your signature?
Yes, it is.
Above the date of the 16th of October 2018.
That's correct.
And have you had a chance to read this statement recently?
Yes.
And can you confirm that its contents are true, subject to some material we're going to look at shortly?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, can I start then, Mr. Neda, with some background? Your family home was flat 205, Grenfell Tower,
Yes, that's right.
on floor 23 of the building.
Yes.
And is it right that you grew up there with your mother and father?
Yes, that's right.
And your father was Mohammed Saber Neda.
Yes.
And in June 2017, can you tell us who lived in your flat with you?
So it was my father, my mother, and I.
And were you in good health at that time?
I was, yes.
And were your parents in good health?
My father was healthy. My mum suffers from a muscular disease.
Do you remember, or did you know, did you rent the flat?
Yes, through the council.
From the council?
Yes.
Can I ask you please to be shown MET 000-12593 and go to page 12? Now, this is a layout of the fourth floor at Grenfell Tower after the refurbishment, which is repeated from floor 4 to floor 23 inclusive, just so you know. It's a standard plan. And flat 205 would be flat 5 in the northwest corner of the tower. Is that right?
Yes.
Looking at this plan, is this an accurate representation of the layout of your flat at the time of the fire?
Yes, there's just a slight difference by the entrance.
Right.
There's a wall on the plan which was a bit different.
Can you just explain the difference?
I can show you.
Yes, by all means.
Yes, do.
We've got a red dot
Okay.
function that comes
So-
up. I wonder whether, Ralph, you could just expand flat 5 or 205 for us, so just to make it clearer. Thank you.
Okay. So this was the entranceway. This wall here didn't exist. Instead, we had a wall going here. So this was sort of large storage room.
I see. Okay. So just for the transcript, the wall that comes out from the east wall by the front door, transversely in an east-west direction, wasn't there, and it was replaced by a longer wall going south-north.
Yeah.
Directly from the right-hand side of the door, front door. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I then start with some questions about fire safety awareness before we turn to the events of the night? If you go, please, first of all to page 20 of your statement, your first statement, and look, please, at paragraph 120. You say there, recently, not too long before the fire, the TMO put up a sign by the lifts which advised that the lifts should not be used during a fire, and also confirmed that there was a stay-put policy in the tower. I think that the sign was on every floor of the tower. Can I just show you first, then, a picture, which is INQ, and then 7 zeros, 93. Is this the sign that you're referring to?
It looks pretty much like that's the sign, yes.
Okay. And which lifts was this sign next to, do you think?
As far as I can remember, it was to the left of, on the left, by the left lift, so closer to flat number 203.
I see. And that's on your floor?
Yes,
23rd
that's on our floor, yes.
Right. Do you know, or do you remember whether this sign was to be found anywhere else in the tower at the time of the fire?
I hadn't noticed it. I mean, the only two floors that I would go to were the ground floor and the
Right.
23rd floor, so I wouldn't be sure.
Okay. Do you remember ever seeing a temporary piece of paper with fire safety advice on it stuck by the lifts on the ground floor?
No, I don't remember.
Okay. How long before the fire at Grenfell Tower, so the night of the 13th, 14th of June 2017, do you remember seeing this sign?
Well, it was put up after the refurbishments had finished, so I would say it wasn't there for. It was less than a year that it had been up.
And was it there at the time of the fire? Do you remember?
Yes.
Okay. Looking at the first part or top part of the sign, it says "Fire Action Grenfell Tower," and then there's some words which aren't highlighted, but it says there is a stay put, quotes unquotes, policy for residents unless the fire is in or affecting your flat. At the time of the fire, did you have any particular understanding of what that meant?
I just, from reading that, I would have thought not to leave our flat if there was a fire.
Did you ever actually read the sign in full?
I do remember reading it, yes.
Okay. Apart from that notice, do you remember any information, other information from any organisation being given to you about what you should do in the event of a fire in the block?
No, not directly to me.
And in general terms, Mr. Neda, as at June 2017, what was your understanding as to what you as a resident should do in the event of a fire in the tower?
So having read the sign, I thought it would be safe to stay inside our flat. I mean, we always used to do fire drills at school and everything, and we used to have to leave the building straight away, but I thought that the sign would be inaccurate. I thought they had put a sign for a reason, so might as well follow it.
Right. You said just a second ago in your last answer, I thought the sign would be inaccurate. Did you mean inaccurate or?
No, I thought it would be. I thought it would be a good policy to follow. I thought it was thought through. I didn't think they would put it up for no reason.
Right. Thank you. Now, can I turn then to the night of the fire itself? And can I start by asking you, please, to look at page 3 of your statement, your first statement, and go, please, in that to paragraph 13. And you say there, my mum and my dad had arrived home in the early hours of the morning on the 14th of June 2017 from visiting my aunt's house. Our two families had eaten together. And then at paragraph 14, you say, I thought we'd got home at approximately between 12:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning. The CCTV still image from the lobby entrance area on the morning of the fire shows that we got to the entrance area at 12:52 a.m. My image shows me entering the tower at 12:51 a.m. and my mum entering 11 seconds later at 12:52 a.m. There's a further image of the three of us getting into the lift at 12:52 a.m. We got back only 2 minutes before the fire started in flat 16 on the 4th floor. Just a few questions about that paragraph. First, when you first entered the tower, did you come through the main entrance?
Yes.
And while you were in the main entrance, do you remember whether you heard anything?
No, I didn't hear anything. It was quiet. It was late at night.
Right. You didn't hear any noise of fans or vents?
Not immediately when we got into the building.
Okay. Do you remember smelling anything in particular at that point?
No.
And You then say at paragraph 15, it was a normal evening when we entered the tower and called a lift from the lobby area at the base. We got into a lift and went straight up to our floor. Do you remember whether both lifts were working at that point?
Yes, they were.
They were. And how do you know that both were working?
Because we were waiting in the lobby for the lift to arrive, and the numbers were showing on both lifts. Usually, if one of the lifts were out of order, it would say lift out of service.
Right. Where would it say that?
On the little screen where it shows what floor the lift is on.
I see. And then you say at 16, as soon as the lift doors opened onto our landing on the 23rd floor, my mum and I both heard the vents/extractor fans in the landing area of our floor. They were making a lot of noise. This was not new and did not surprise us, as it was something that had occurred before. Now, before we discuss that together in a bit more detail, can I just ask you one or two questions about your floor? First, can I ask the witness please be shown two pictures side by side, which is BLA /000 2513 and 2514. Now, I should just tell you, these are photographs of the lobby, the communal lobby, on floor 6. And I wanted to ask you about what you can see at the far end on each side. One is taken from one direction, from the direction to the right of the lifts, and the photograph on the right-hand side is taken, as you can see, to the left of the lifts, looking in the opposite direction. And on each wall at the far end, you can see what look like vent coverings. Are those vent coverings or vent entrances things that you had on your floor?
Yes.
You did. And were they on both sides of the lobby on floor 23?
Yes. So exactly like that. On our side, they were up higher, and then on the other side, it was low.
And in this photograph, we can see a white detector on the ceiling. Did you have one of those on floor 23 in the lobby there? You did. Did you know what that was?
I presumed it was a smoke alarm, a fire alarm.
A fire alarm?
Yes.
Right. Did anybody ever explain to you what it was?
No.
Now, when you, going back to paragraph 16, when you got out of the lift, when the lift doors opened, you say you heard a noise. Do you remember whether the noise was coming from both sets of ventilation entrances or shafts, or only one?
I wouldn't be able to say.
Right. Do you remember where the noise was loudest in the lobby?
When we got out of the lift, we went left towards our flat. So for me, it was that side. That's the side I could hear the most.
Yes. So you go left and then left again?
Yes.
Can you, looking back on it now, can you describe for us the sound you were hearing? It sounded just like wind was going through the building. So it was as if it was coming from the floors downstairs, just all shooting up towards the 23rd floor. Right.
And then every few minutes you could hear the fans sort of closing. So it had like I think it was a mechanical sound of the fans opening and closing. But it didn't happen too much. It was like every 5 minutes it would happen once.
Right. And could you hear that opening and closing sound from the lobby and from your flat, or just from the lobby?
No, from the flat as well.
From the flat as well. The opening and closing sound, could you, I'm sorry to ask you to go into so much detail, but can you just describe that opening and closing sequence sound for us?
It sounded like a motor was turning. I mean, that's the best I could describe it.
And what would change when the vents closed, went from closed to open, or went from open to closed? In terms of the sound, what would change?
So the wind would stop coming up, but that would only be very briefly, and it would open again.
I see. Okay. Did you observe? Did you see anything while you were in the lobby? Anything happening with the doors, the shutters, if you like, to the vents? Did they open and close?
I didn't pay close attention to it because they had a sort of white mesh which was going over it, so you'd have to look, put your eyes through the little holes to be able to see that.
Yes. And while you were in the lobby, did you notice any movement of air coming from one direction or another direction?
No, I didn't notice it.
Okay. Still staying in the lobby for the moment, do you remember how loud the sound was?
So it was loud enough for us to be able to hear it from our living room while our front door was closed. So our living room is probably the furthest point away that you could be from the fan inside within our flat.
Yes. So
we could hear it from there,
right,
clearly.
And while in the lobby, how loud was it?
In the lobby, we would have to probably raise our voice quite a bit to be able to speak to each other if we were standing in the lobby.
Okay. So was it as loud as a vacuum cleaner?
Yeah, I think about as loud as a vacuum cleaner. Yeah.
Right. Now, in paragraph 18, you say, since the council had undertaken the refurbishment work in the tower, the air vents in the lift area of the landing would go off regularly. They would start opening and closing loudly, about once a month. When they opened, we would get huge gusts of wind going through the tower, particularly onto our floor. On one particular occasion, you could hear it from outside the tower. It often seemed to happen on a Friday and would not be sorted out until the following Monday. When we got onto the 23rd floor, they were going off loudly, and it would have been impossible for us to sleep with such a noise. Now, I've read that all to you because, again, there are one or two things in detail I want to discuss about it. But in paragraph 18, you say there you got huge gusts of air through the tower. Where in the tower would you feel these gusts?
In the lift lobby area.
Would you feel them anywhere else in the tower when these vents were going off in this way?
No. No, you would just be able to hear it, not feel it.
And do you remember where these gusts of air that you've described would be coming from?
From the air vents. I don't know where the source of it was, but where it would end up would be in our lobby area through the air vents.
On the night when you heard this sound and these vents going off as you got out of the lift, do you remember the same kind of gusts or feeling the gusts at that point?
Yeah. So it was a little bit windy in our lobby area.
Right.
It was warm air. I presume because it was summer. We were just getting air from outside coming out.
And do you remember which vent in the lobby the gusts or wind that you're describing were coming from?
So it was the ones on the left side, in between flat 206 and 205.
So the ones nearest your flat?
Yes. That's the ones I felt it from.
And was the wind coming out towards you?
Yes.
Was it strong or weak, or can you describe?
It wasn't too strong, no. Just enough to feel it. Yeah.
Yes. Do you remember whether you were ever at any stage in the main ground floor lobby of the building at the same time as the vents were activating, as you've described it?
I'm not sure, because we couldn't. When we got in, I couldn't hear it from downstairs, and I couldn't feel anything. So, I'm not sure.
No. What about on other occasions when these vents were going off?
There was one occasion, which was a few months before the fire, where the problem had got so loud that you could even hear the vents going off from outside the tower. So this was at the point, I believe, when we were still using the walkway as the entrance during the refurbishments, and I don't know where the sound was coming from, but you could just hear it clearly from outside the tower. It went on for, I think, over 24 hours.
And during that 24-hour period, do you remember whether you could feel air moving in the main lobby of the building?
I can't remember in the main lobby, but on our floor we could definitely feel it. I think it was so strong that it would cause the doors to the stairwell to open and close a little bit, very slightly. It would move the doors, the doors that you would go into the stairwell with from.
Really? Okay. Do you remember being in the stairwell at any time during that, for example, that 24-hour period you've described?
No, I don't remember.
Do you remember being in the stairwell at any time when these vents were going off, at any time prior to the fire?
No.
Okay. Now, you've said in paragraph 18 at the very top of page 4 that you would get these gusts of wind going through the tower, and you say particularly onto our floor. When you say particularly onto our floor, do you mean that the noise and the wind that you were, or air movement that you were experiencing were worse on your floor than other floors?
I presume so, yes, because we were at the top floor, so I couldn't see anywhere else that the vents would lead to. From what I could see, everything would just come up to our floor.
Right. And did you ever have an opportunity to make a comparison between the noise and air movement on your floor and the air and noise on lower floors?
No.
Okay. On the night of the fire, when you came out of the lift and stood in the lobby, was the noise that you heard coming from the air vents louder than you'd heard in the past?
No, it was about the same as what we would usually get.
Okay.
Because it happened so often, the only time it was louder was that 24-hour period while the refurbishments were going on. But other than that, it always used to be consistent.
And then you go on in paragraph 19 to say there had been previous occasions when the fans had gone off and I telephoned the Tenants Management Organisation, the TMO, to complain about the noise. It would normally take the TMO a few days to come out to the 23rd floor to fix the problem. First, did they come to the 23rd floor to fix the problem, or did they fix the problem elsewhere in the tower?
I think it was elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you say that they came out to the 23rd floor to fix the problem, did they do anything on the 23rd floor? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. I would never see them working on the problem. I would just notice it being fixed. For example, if I would leave in the morning to go to work, in the evening I would come and the noise would be finished.
Right. Did you ever see them working on the problem?
No, I never saw them working on it.
So you don't know where they worked?
No.
Okay. Did you ever find out what they actually did to fix the problem?
No.
Do you know who came from the TMO? Which person? Persons?
No.
Did you ever get to the bottom? Did you ever discover yourself what was actually causing the vent system to start operating like that?
No, we never really followed up. We were just happy to get the noise stopped.
Yeah. Do you remember whether other residents of the tower complained to the TMO about the vents operating in that way?
I'm not sure, but usually whenever I would call the TMO, they would say we've had complaints about this before. So I assume that other people were complaining about it as well.
Did you ever discuss this problem with any of your neighbours?
I can't remember.
Now, can I just go back a step to paragraph 18 in your statement, where you're describing the previous occasions. Where could you hear when you say you could hear the noise outside the tower?
Yeah.
How far away from the tower could you hear that noise on that, let's say, that 24-hour occasion when it was particularly bad?
So, while at that stage we were using the walkway to exit from the tower, and we had a little staircase that we've come up from the ground floor to the walkway.
Yeah.
You could hear it up to the staircase. So, yeah, even when you're at the staircase, you would be able to hear it. And when you would go down, you would go around the corner onto Grenfell Road. So walking towards the sports centre. So as you get to about the corner of Grenfell Road leading to the sports centre, that's when you would start to stop hearing it.
So I see.
Yeah.
So about 50 yards,
Yeah, I
40
guess
metres
so.
away from the tower, also.
Yeah.
Do you remember whether the noise came... Well, let me ask it this way. Do you remember there being an air vent or some kind of vent above the new main entrance to the tower?
I can't remember. I think there was something like 3 or 4 horizontal lines which looked like air vents. I'm not sure what they were. I think it was located somewhere between the walkway level and the 3rd floor. I can't remember exactly the position.
And did you ever notice a vent noise or fan noise coming from those horizontal bars, as you've described them?
Only on that one occasion where the noise was very loud.
You could hear it coming from that, could you?
I think it was coming from there. Yeah, that's the only place that I could that seemed plausible.
Now, moving forward, not very far, but moving forward nonetheless, you say in paragraph 20, Mum and I looked at one another, and one of us said, "We will not be sleeping tonight," referencing the noise. We knew from previous experience how difficult it was to sleep with the howling noise created by the ventilation system. I'm interested in this howling. It's difficult to describe it, I know, but were there parts of the sound that you heard? I mean, could you hear it in, as it were, different parts of sound?
Yeah. So sometimes it would be just a gust of wind, and then sometimes it would feel like as if it was trying to push through a small gap. So that's when it would start making the howling and the whistling sort of noises, just like wind, just normal wind.
Right. And in terms of the mechanical sound, did you ever hear a high-pitched whine over the top of the rest of the sound?
I don't. Would you be able to describe the noise better?
Probably not.
Yeah.
All right, let me try a different one. Did you ever hear a low sort of bass, or feel a low bass hum when the vents were working?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going to paragraph 21, you say, "I went into our flat. I got changed to get ready for bed. My mum told me to call the TMO's emergency number to let them know that the ventilator fan was going off in the landing area. There is a 24-hour emergency number to call." And I think you then, as you say in the next paragraph, called the emergency number sometime between 1 a.m. and 1:15. I'm going to come to that in a moment. Before we do, can I ask you, when you got inside the flat, did the volume of the sound that you'd heard outside in the lobby change?
So the volume decreased a bit, but it was still loud enough to hear. We could still hear it clearly from inside the flat.
You could hear it from the outside?
So from the outside of the flat, we could hear it loudly.
Right.
From the inside, we could hear it clearly. It was a lot. It was the volume was lower, but we could hear it clearly.
Okay. And do you remember where your father was at this stage?
I believe he was getting changed in his bedroom.
And then you say you made the call. Do you remember where you were when you made the call?
So I was walking around. I
Inside
would
the
walk
flat?
from my bedroom to the living room and back. I have a habit of pacing up and down when I'm on the phone.
Yes, I know what you mean. But you were inside the flat?
Yes.
Okay. And was the door closed?
It was, yes.
Yes. Now, we've got a transcript of the call, and in fact we've also got the audio of the call. So what I'd like to do is just play the audio of the call together with the transcript side by side to you, just so as to get you to confirm the conversation. So are you all right with me doing that?
Yes, sure.
Okay. I don't know whether this needs a trigger warning, Mr. Chairman. It might do. So I just ought to say
This
that
is not a call that relates to the fire.
it is not a call that relates. Well, it's only potentially and indirectly, but yes,
Yeah.
it's not. There's no fire, and you can't hear or certainly can't see fire on this. But I just should make it clear for those who are about to see this evidence that because it brings back the night, people might find it distressing.
Yes, all right, thank you.
But while we're doing that, can we just have on the screen the transcript and then ready the audio to play? So there's the transcript. And what we'll do is we'll just play the audio. It's 1 minute and 17 seconds, and it's timed at 1:10 a.m. on the 14th of June, 2017. So, Ralph, if we can just play the audio.
Thank you for calling Kensington and Chelsea out of hours. You're speaking to Hayley. How can I help?
Hi, I'm calling from 205 Grenfell Tower.
Hello.
Basically, in the lift area, in the communal area, the air vents are making lots of noise and there's a kind of electrical burning smell.
Okay, we've got the I believe it's to do with the fire alarms. We've got the fire alarm engineer on his way.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Has the fire brigade been on site?
I haven't seen them, no. I haven't seen any fire or anything. I just can smell like the electrical burning smell.
Right, okay. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. We have had a call regarding the fire alarms. Have you heard them going off at all?
No, we just got home like
fair.
10 minutes ago.
Okay, yeah. The fire brigade, apparently they are on their way as well, so you might see them shortly.
Okay, yeah, because there's one lift that's not working as well. I don't know if that's connected to it.
Yeah, it might be because of the fire alarm, because they sort of go down all at the same time. But we will look into the end. That's all right. Take care.
You too,
Bye.
thanks. Bye-bye.
Now, having seen the transcript and also now having heard the audio, Mr. Neda, are you happy to accept that that's the conversation you had with RBKC?
Yes.
About the vents?
Yes.
Okay. And so does that mean that we have to read your first and second statements and your recollection of that call now differently, having seen the transcript?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And the audio?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, going back to your experience, you said in that call, and we heard it, that you smelt an electrical burning. I just want to explore that a bit. How strong was that smell at that time?
So it began off quite light, and it started getting stronger and stronger. But what I clearly remember is that it was definitely coming from the vents.
The smell was?
Yes, the smell was definitely coming from the vents.
So that you could smell it while you were still in the lobby, could you?
Yes.
Right. And was it in the air coming out of the vents?
Yeah, so you could smell it. As soon as you come out of the lift, you would be able to smell it.
Right. Do you remember at that point whether there was any smoke coming out of the vents?
Not at that point, no.
Okay. Right. When you got into your flat, could you still smell the electrical burning smell?
Not to begin with. We would have to open the front door to be able to smell it. But after a while, the smell started to come inside. So I remember at one point I was standing by my bedroom door, which is the second bedroom as you come into the flat, and I could smell it from there clearly.
Really? And how, and it's hard to guess, but how long after the call did you start smelling the electrical burning smell in the flat?
I would say about 5 to 10 minutes after the call.
When you were in the lobby, before you went into your flat, do you remember whether anybody else came out into the lobby from your neighbours' flats?
No, no one did.
Nobody, okay. You say in your statement at paragraph 23, and indeed we've seen it in the transcript and on the call, that you'd noticed that one of the lifts wasn't working. How had you noticed that one of the lifts wasn't working?
So during the call, I kept on going outside into the lobby area. So at one point when I went out, this was while I was on the phone to the TMO, I realized that on the lift, one of the lifts, the one on the left side, closer to 203, where it would usually say the numbers, it just said lift out of order or lift under maintenance. I can't remember which one.
Right. And was that... Did you notice that the lift was out of order when you came out of the lift, or did you not look?
When we came out of the lift, I don't think I looked, but when we were coming up, while we were waiting for the lift, which was literally about 2 minutes before we got up to our floor, because the lifts were quite fast, both lifts were working.
They were working, as you said before. Okay, so when you made the call over that 1 minute and 17-second period, you were in and out of your flat. How many times can you remember, even roughly, you went out onto the lobby and then went back into your flat?
I think a minimum of 3 times.
Right, so quite a lot of pacing.
Yeah.
Okay. And were you holding the door open at that stage?
I think my mum was holding the door open. She stayed by the front door most of the time, whereas I was walking up and down.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you happen to know which lift had stopped working?
It was the one, so if you're facing the lifts as if you would go into them, it would be the left one.
The left. Was that the one you came up in?
I can't remember now which one we came up in.
I see. Okay. And after the call finished, did you stay in your flat?
No, we stayed in, but every now and then I would keep on going outside into the lobby area to... I was sort of trying to investigate the smell myself, like why was this smell on our floor? Because at that point we couldn't see anything. There was no smoke or anything. It was just a smell.
Was that smell something that you experienced on that night for the first time?
Yes, on that night.
So the previous occasions on which the vent had started operating in the way you've described, does that mean there was no smell that you experienced?
No, there was no smell at all.
Now, you say in paragraph 28 of your first statement on page 5, in fact, I'd just like to go back to paragraph 27, in fact. You say in that paragraph that you went to bed after the call, but the smell of burning was getting stronger and stronger and coming into our flat. We looked earlier on this morning at the first time at which you experienced the smell in the flat, and I think you were saying you were standing in the hall. Is that right, or were you actually in bed by that time?
So I was in bed. My mum came into my room and said that the smell was getting worse.
Yeah.
So I got out of bed and I got to about the door of my room, and that's from where I could smell.
Right. So when you go on to say our front door was closed and the smell had made its way into my bedroom, at that point, had the smell come into your bedroom or was it still in the hall?
So it eventually did come into the bedroom. I can't remember exactly how long it took, but it did eventually come in.
Okay. And you continued to hear the vents from within the flat.
Yes.
Did the sound that you were hearing ever stop at any point that you stayed in the flat on that night?
I think up until the point where we noticed there was a fire in the building, I was paying attention to it and I could hear them. After that point, I think I started worrying about other things, so I stopped paying attention to the sound of the vents.
Okay. Now, Mr. Chairman, we've had just over 45 minutes,
Yes.
and I'm going to change to a different topic. Mr. Neda, is it convenient to you to take a break now?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Right, well,
Chairman?
we should take a break now then, Mr. Neda. I'm going to suggest that we come back at 11 o'clock, and please don't talk to anyone about your evidence when you're out of the room.
Sure.
Is that all right?
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to go to the usher then, please? She'll look after you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good, 11 o'clock, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Neda, you
Yep.
happy to carry on?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Neda.
Mr. Neda, thank you for coming back to us.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the events of the night in a bit more detail. But before I do, can I just ask you one or two questions, just going back a little bit? When you first went into your flat, having come up the lifts and gone through the lobby, did you notice any sound of the vents coming from elsewhere other than from outside the flat?
No. No, I didn't.
You didn't hear any sound coming from above you, did you?
No.
No. Do you remember whether there was on the 23rd floor, there was a gate that would take you, if it was open, up to the roof?
Yes, there was. It was locked for quite a while.
It was locked for quite a while. Do you remember when it was first locked?
It was it was many years. So I think well over 5 years it had been locked. The gates didn't exist when we moved in. I think they were only put there to stop homeless people sleeping in the stairwell.
Right, I see. And who had the key to that gate? Do you know?
No, it was. It looked like one of those. It looked like a special key, so it wasn't a normal key that would open the gate. It would be one of those workman keys, or one that the fire brigade would usually have.
You don't know who had that key, so
No.
that if you needed to open it, you could?
No. I presumed that before the refurbishments, we had someone downstairs, a concierge or security kind of person, who would. I presumed he had access, but after the refurbishments, there was no one there, so there was no access up there for us.
And do you know whether the gate was locked on the night of the fire?
It was locked.
Did you see it and look?
No, I don't think I looked, but every time that prior to the fire, every time that I would see it, it was always locked. I don't think I had ever seen it open since they fitted it in.
Right. Did you or did anybody else on that night, to your knowledge, try the gate to see if it was unlocked?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Can I then go back into your statement and pick up the evidence at the point at which you're in your flat, in your bedroom, and you're starting to smell the burning? When you smelt it, was it the same smell of burning that you had first smelt outside the flat when you were there?
Yes.
It's electrical smell.
Yes.
And when you say an electrical burning smell, can you, I know it's difficult to describe these things, but can you describe the smell?
So it's say if you had like two open wires and you would touch them and you get a spark
Yes.
from it, it would be that kind of smell.
Right. At that stage, do you remember, did you see any visible signs of smoke inside your flat at that point, when you come out of your bedroom and you can
No.
smell? No. Did you look out of the window at that point?
We did look out of the window, yes. We couldn't see anything.
You didn't see any visible signs of smoke outside the flat
No.
at that stage?
No.
Now, you then say, if you go to page 5 of your statement, paragraphs 29 and 30, you say, when we next looked out onto our landing, we could see that both of the lifts were now out of order, and we could also see that people were slowly coming out of their flats onto our landing. Something just started to seem not right. How long do you think, and it's hard I know, but how long after the call to RBKC that we've seen earlier this morning do you think that took place?
I think I don't think it was longer than 15 minutes after the call.
And when you say we looked out onto our landing, who was the we?
My mother and I.
Okay. And when you did that, do you remember what the conditions in the lobby were like at that point?
It was still clear.
Still clear.
We could see clearly everything.
Was the noise from the vent still going?
Yes.
And could you still smell the electrical burning smell?
Yes.
Was it stronger at that stage?
Yeah, it was getting stronger.
Right. Could you still feel the air or breeze coming out of the vent?
I think so. I can't be 100% sure, but I think so.
Okay. Do you remember which neighbours came out onto your landing?
I believe flat 206 had come out. The younger lady that lived in that flat, she had come out. I don't remember looking at the faces of other people, just because I had that weird feeling. So I don't know if it was that I was nervous and I was just pacing up and down, trying to look to see what was going on. So I didn't really notice who else was there, but I'm sure there was about at least 2 or 3 other people that they at least opened their doors.
Did you speak to them?
No.
Were they in their night clothes, or were they
yes.
dressed to leave?
No, everyone was in their night clothes. It seemed like they had just woken up.
I see. Okay. And then you go on to say in paragraph 30, I do not remember all the details, but it got to a point where we decided to leave our flat and we wanted to make our way down the stairs. Do you remember what it was that prompted your decision to leave?
So I remember at one point, my dad was looking out of the window, and he said that I think there's a fire downstairs. We still couldn't see the fire, but I think my dad, he must have leant out of the window to have a look, and I just trusted what my dad said, and I said, I think best thing to do is leave now.
Right. Did you look out of the window at that point?
I looked out, but I didn't. I couldn't see anything. I didn't lean out to try and get a better view. I just looked out the standard view that I had.
Do you remember which window you looked out?
It was my dad's, so my parents' bedroom.
Okay. Just say we're clear. I should have asked you this earlier on, but can we just have the diagram of the flat back up, please? Which is MET 000012593, page 12. And can you just identify for us which of the 2 bedrooms was yours?
My bedroom is the one closest to the lounge.
Okay. So the one halfway down the hall?
Yes.
And which window do you remember looking out of, just on that diagram?
So the window on the right-hand side, the far right.
The far right?
Top corner,
bedroom.
yeah.
Your parents' bedroom?
Yes.
Okay. Looking north?
Yes. And
did you say you didn't see any signs of fire at that stage?
No, I didn't.
Did you hear anything?
I think I started hearing like people talking. So it was like when you would open the window, you could hear people outside. You couldn't make out what they were saying, but you could hear them.
And at the point you made the decision to leave, having done so, do you know how long that was after your conversation with RBKC we looked at earlier?
I think it was probably about half an hour after.
Now, at page 5, paragraph 30, you go on to say, me, my mum and my dad, got dressed again, and we left the flat, locked our front door, and we even went into the staircase. At that point, we saw people from downstairs coming up towards us. These people were our neighbours from lower floors. Now, just taking this bit by bit, when you went out, having made the decision to leave, was anybody else out in the lobby at that time?
I can't remember.
Could you still hear the air vents going?
I stopped paying attention at that point. I wasn't paying attention to the noise of the air vents.
Do you remember what the air conditions were like in the lobby at that time?
We could still see. I think there was very little smoke that had started coming in from the vents, but we could still see clearly, make everything out clearly.
You said smoke coming in from the vents.
Yes.
Is that something you remember?
Yes, that's something I remember. That's where the smoke, that's how the smoke got onto our floor. I remember that clearly because I was looking, so even after this occasion where we tried to leave initially, I kept on going out into the lobby and coming back in, and I could see that's where the smoke was coming in slowly. So say if you were coming out of the lift, you would be in the middle of the lobby area. You could see the smoke sort of filling in from the two sides and making its way towards the middle. And that's something you could see clearly. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow process, but you could see it slowly filling up the lobby with smoke. And you could see that's where it was coming from.
So this is at the point, just to be absolutely clear, this is at the point when you leave the flat with your mum and dad ready to go down, about 30 minutes or so after the call with Hayley, and you see smoke come. What was the colour of the smoke at that time?
So it was black. It wasn't as thick. It was so black smoke but not thick.
Did you smell it?
I still have the burning smell in my nose at that point, so that's still what I could smell.
Okay, right, okay. And how fast, under how much pressure do you think it was coming out of the vents?
Well, the smoke was coming out very slowly. It wasn't fast at all. I think it was quite slow.
But you could see movement, could you, of the smoke?
Yeah.
As it. Did it seem to you to be coming out under any kind of pressure?
No, not really.
Okay. And you say the smoke was coming from both sides and meeting in the middle. Was it dissipating anywhere from the lobby, or was it just collecting in the lobby?
So it started collecting in the lobby. At that point, I had made the decision that it was unsafe to go back into the lobby. So I had locked myself into our flat. So this is after we made our first attempt to get out. And after that, I started looking at it through, so our front door had a peephole, sort of just to look, if someone knocks the door, you can see who's outside. So you could, it had a little glass there. So I kept on looking out through that peephole, and I could see that it was getting thicker and thicker, and it got to a point where we couldn't see anything at all from that peephole. And and then I remember the smoke started coming in from under our front door, and it got to a point where I couldn't get close to the front door either, so I couldn't look through the peephole anymore either. So slowly it started, the same way it was making its way to the middle of the hallway, it started making its way from our entrance into our rooms.
Right. Just breaking that down a little bit, so I can understand a bit more detail there. How long did you spend, do you think, in the lobby when you first decided with your mother and father to leave, and you saw the smoke coming through the vents? How long did you spend in the lobby?
It wasn't long at all. So we got into the staircase. There was quite a few people that were coming up, so we couldn't. There were so many people that were coming up that we couldn't get past them to go down. So I think the first few people that were in front, we asked them what was going on. I think they said something along the lines like, "There's no way out. There's a fire and there's no way out." I think someone had mentioned that the fire was in the stairwell as well, so we couldn't make our way down the stairs. So we just went back into our door, into our apartment.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that aspect of things in a moment. Can I just pick up on something else, which is you go back into your flat and you look through the peephole in your front door. Could you see the smoke vent on the north wall of the lobby from your peephole?
No, there was a little wall that was blocking our view to that.
Okay.
So in front of us, there was a wall where you could only see partially, so up to about the new doors to where they had enclosed the pipework on the lobby area.
Yes,
you could see, I think, the first door of that, closest to our flat.
Right. Okay. When you went back into your flat, how soon did you first then look out of the peephole?
So I think we all went into the living room, spent about a minute just talking to the other people, seeing what was going on.
Yes.
And then I think my mum and dad stayed there in the living room, and I made my way back into our hallway to have a look through the peephole. So literally about a minute.
And was there, when you looked out of the peephole, did you see any difference in the smoke conditions of the lobby?
Yeah, it was a lot thicker, much less visibility. You could still see a little bit of the floor, so you could see the blue part of the floor. But it was getting darker and darker.
And just so we're clear, the peephole was glass. Was it clear? Did you have a clear view through the peephole?
Yes.
It wasn't misty or anything like that?
No, not at that stage. Not the first time I looked out of it.
Right. Okay. Now, going back a little bit in your evidence, you say at paragraph 30, which is where we were, I've just read to you, you wanted to make your way down the stairs, and you then say in the third line, as we've seen, you even went into the staircase. So you've got across the lobby.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you, who opened the door to the staircase? Do you remember?
No, I can't remember.
Because I think it's right, you have to push the door into the staircase, don't you?
Yes.
Do you know, or do you remember whether whoever it was who pushed the door into the staircase found it more difficult to open than normal?
No, I can't remember.
Is there any air pressure pressing against the stairwell door that you might recall?
I can't remember.
Okay. When you got into the stairs, how far into the stairs did you get on that
So
occasion?
we didn't manage to take a step down. So we were on the landing of our floor.
I see.
That's as far as we got because it was the stairs were just full of people,
full of people.
coming up.
A couple of questions about the conditions in the stair. First of all, did you notice any smoke in the stair when you got into it?
No.
And did you notice any change in the temperature in the stair at that point?
No.
Could you feel any movement of air up or down or across in the stair at that point?
I can't remember.
No. Could you still smell the burning smell in the stairs?
I don't think it was in the staircase.
Okay. And then you say at paragraph 30 at the end, and as you've just told us, that people were coming up, and they were your neighbours from lower floors. And then in paragraph 31 you say they were coming up, and this is the top of page 6, they were coming up, paragraph 31, we can just expand that. They were coming up and telling us that there was a fire in the tower and that they had been told to come up to the top floor. They told us that there was no way out through the stairs. At this point, there was not much smoke on our floor, and I could still see clearly. First of all, how many people do you remember in total were coming up as you stepped out onto the landing outside the stairwell door?
I would estimate it a minimum of 10 people.
And did you know them?
Yes. Because I was in such a rush to get down and with everything going on, I just noticed the first 4 people who eventually ended up coming into our flat with us.
Yes.
So that's the ones I remember clearly. The rest I don't remember exactly who it was, but
okay.
Yeah.
Did you know them?
Yes.
You knew who they were?
Yes.
Okay. And did you speak to... did you remember who you spoke to?
I remember speaking... it began with one of the Iranian ladies that had come up, who ended up in our flat. And then I think the person who I got most information from was Miriam.
Miriam?
Yes.
Miriam El-Ghwari?
Yes, that's right. She's the one that I got most information from.
Okay. Now, so going back to paragraph 31, when you say they were telling us there was a fire in the tower, is that information that came from Miriam, do you think?
Yes. I remember she said that the fire was already in their flats. She said she mentioned that her flat was already burnt.
You then say they had been told to come up to the top floor. Do you know, or did she tell you who had told her to go to the top floor?
No.
Did you get any impression of who had given that advice?
I thought it was the firefighters that had told her. Yeah.
She didn't say?
No, she didn't say.
Did anybody else in that group that you encountered then tell you the same thing, that they had been told to come up to the top floor?
I believe one of the Iranian ladies, they kept on mentioning that they had been told that helicopters would come and rescue them from the top. I don't know where she got this information from, but that's what she told us.
Right. And then you go on in the next sentence of paragraph 31 to say, they told us there was no way out through the stairs. First of all, do you remember who told you that?
I can't remember, no.
And when you say there was no way out through the stairs, can you remember what they actually said?
I think that they said that the fire was in the staircase. That's what I remember.
Right. And then you say that in paragraph 32, I had my house keys in my pocket and I opened the flat door again and we went back into our flat. And then you say in the next paragraph, 4 of the women that had come up from the floors below came into our flat with us, and you describe who they are. Did you invite them in?
I think everyone that had come up stairs just followed whoever they were most comfortable with. So I feel like the 4 ladies that came into our flat, they were most comfortable with us because with Miriam, I remember her from school, so she was a few years older than me, but I do remember seeing her, so she was a familiar face, and we spoke on a few occasions. Every time we would see each other in the lifts, we would say hi and just ask each other how we were doing. And the Iranian ladies would always speak to my mum. I think my mum had visited them, or they had visited my mum. I can't remember on a previous occasion. So they felt most comfortable coming with us, so they followed us into our flats. The rest followed the other neighbours. So I can't remember if anyone went into 206, but I saw quite a few people going to the other side of the lobby, so where flat 201, 202 and 203 were.
Yes. Had the occupants of those flats come out onto the lobby at that stage to greet or encourage the other members of the
at that stage, everyone was opening their doors at that stage and to see what was going on.
Right.
I think we were probably one of the lucky ones in the fact that we were still awake at the time when we discovered the fire. Everyone else was probably still sleeping. I remember flat 204, the gentleman that lived in flat 204, he opened the door and he looked like as if he had just woken up. Still looked a bit confused as to what was going on. He opened the door and he just closed it again. Looked outside and closed it again.
Did any of the people who'd come up the stairs tell you anything about other people in the stairs blocking access?
No.
You don't remember that?
No, I don't think anyone did mention it.
Right. Do you remember whether anybody spoke to your mother at that stage?
Yes, my mum was speaking to someone. I wasn't part of the conversation. I don't think I was even listening, but I could see out of the corner of my eye that she was speaking to someone.
Okay. Do you remember who she was speaking to?
No, I don't remember.
All right. And you say that you took them into, I think, to the living room.
Yes.
That's the whole group, is it?
Yeah, everyone went into the living room.
Okay. And on page 6 of your statement, at paragraph 35, you say, the 2 Iranian women stayed close to my dad. Mariam and her mum sat on the sofa in the living room. And you then go on to say that you knew her from going to school. Where was your father at this time?
So my dad was also walking around the flat quite a lot. So he spent quite a lot of the time in his bedroom, but he would every now and then come into the living room. There was a stage where I told my dad to just stay close to us, because every time I just felt like we have to all be together. And I would just see my dad suddenly wandering off, and I didn't feel comfortable with that. So I told him to stay close to us. But even after I did tell him that, I remember there was another occasion where he just went into his bedroom for the last time. And when he came back out, he just told us, don't go into my bedroom because the fire's already in there.
Now, paragraph 36, you describe how the smoke was coming in, and you say the flat was filling up the flat slowly. I think the fire, that should say, was filling up the flat slowly. Each time we opened the door, the smoke poured in. When you say the door, is that the front door?
The front door, yes.
Okay. And do you remember where, or when the door was shut, whether there was smoke coming in?
From the bottom, yes.
From the bottom of the front door?
Yes.
And do you remember what the colour of the smoke was?
It was black.
Black. Did the smoke have a particular smell or taste? Do you remember?
I can't remember, no.
Do you remember how thick it was when it was coming in?
It was... So when it started to come in, it was quite light, and as more and more smoke came in, I think it just sort of filled up the air and made it darker.
Right. So thin black going to thicker black.
Yes.
Is that? Have I got that right?
That's quite accurate.
Okay. How often do you think you opened the front door?
I think until the point where I couldn't see anything from the peephole. I stopped opening it, the front door from then. So I believe I opened it maybe about 3-4 times. But that was just to check if anyone else had come out into the lobby, to see if any firefighters had come up. Because you couldn't really see from the peephole clearly anymore. So the only way for me to look out was to open the door physically and pop my head out.
Yes. And when you did that, could you breathe?
Yes. So I could breathe, but because of running around so much, even within the flat, I think I had got a bit breathless. I don't know if that was to do with the smoke or just from me running around, but I had got a bit breathless. And then the point where I realized that the smoke was actually taking a toll on us was while we were all in the living room, even though we were away from the smoke, as far away from the smoke as we could be, I realized that around everyone's noses there was blackness around everyone's nose, and at that point I just realized that must be around my nose as well. So the smoke must be doing something to us.
Right. How soon after the group came into the flat did you notice black marks around people's noses?
I think probably about 10-15 minutes after everyone came in.
Okay. And let's start with you, were you feeling discomfort in terms of breathing or your nose or lungs?
My nose was just a bit itchy from the inside. That's about it. It just had like a itchy, tingly kind of sensation, but I couldn't really feel anything else.
What about your throat?
My throat felt fine at that time.
And your lungs?
I didn't feel anything.
No. Okay. Could you still smell that electrical burning smell that you described to us earlier, that you'd smelt at the beginning of this?
I think at that stage, it wasn't just the electrical burning smell. You could smell there was a whole load of different smells that were in the air.
Right.
So I think there was like chemicals, like you could smell like wood. So it was a mixture of different smells.
That's really helpful. Can you just give us a bit more on that? So you say chemicals, wood. Anything else that you remember, you pick out?
I guess the probably metal. So it had like I don't know how to explain it, but it's sort of like if you can taste sort of sourness, kind of sourness in. It's very difficult to explain the smell.
Yeah, I understand. It is difficult, but that's okay. Sourness. What about metallic?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a metallic sourness.
Exactly.
Right. So I put that idea into your head, but is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Did the group all stay in one place in the flat, or were people moving about?
So we were moving around, but not as to go into the different bedrooms. We were in the living room and the kitchen. So we were moving around from the living room to the kitchen, from the kitchen to the living room. Yeah.
When you were moving around the flat, did you yourself observe any sources of smoke coming in, apart from underneath the front door?
No. At that stage, it was just our hallway. So inside our flat, the hallway up to my bedroom door, it was completely black, so you couldn't see anything. Smoke was coming in through there. I thought possibly that it's coming in from my dad's bedroom because he's mentioned that the fire had already started in there.
Yeah.
I do remember opening the windows every now and then to get some smoke out and get some fresh air in. But I do remember when we did open the window, at that point there was smoke coming up from outside. So we couldn't keep the windows open for too long because the smoke would get into our flat.
Right. Do you remember which window it was that you opened?
Yeah, so we opened the kitchen window and the living room window closest, the one which is closest to my bedroom. So we had 4 windows in the living room. The one which was closest to my bedroom, that's the one we were opening.
Right. And the kitchen window?
Yes.
So both west side and north side?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I just want to take a step outside this particular part of the night and just look at something a bit more general. At paragraph 130 of your statement, you say, and 131 in particular, you describe in 130 the replacement of the old windows with new windows and gaps being left around the edges, and those gaps then being filled. At 131, can I just ask you to look at that? You say, and this is the top of page 22, our flat was always cold after the new windows were installed. So it's 131. Our flat was always cold after the new windows were installed, as gaps underneath the windows were allowing drafts to come through. The whole tower was a lot colder with the new windows. I remember the wall in my bedroom, which my bed backed onto, was always cold to touch. I did not personally report this, but I believe my mum did. Now, I just want to ask you questions about that paragraph, and then we come back to the night.
Sure.
Do you remember where around... Well, first of all, which windows were allowing drafts to come through? Do you remember which ones in the flat they were?
The main one which I can remember was my bedroom one, because that's where I spent most of my time. I remember there was a window which my mum had sellotaped to stop the draft coming in. I can't remember which window it was, but I do remember that there was sellotape on one of the windows.
Okay. When did she put the sellotape there? Do you remember?
No, I can't remember. It was very soon after the windows had been fitted.
Okay. Do you remember which part of the window she put sellotape on?
So it would have been... so where you have the windowsill, just the PVC covering would sort of go around it and go towards the bottom.
Yes.
So at that bottom there was small gaps where usually where I've seen windows they're siliconed in or something is there to, but we had a very small gap there.
Mm. And could you feel air coming in through that gap?
I could hear it. I never felt it myself. Right. So with my window in my bedroom, I could feel it. Other windows, I didn't really experience it much. I didn't spend much time out of my room when I was at home. But from my window, you could feel the wind, and also you could hear it as well.
Did you yourself or your mum block that with sellotape or anything else?
No.
Okay.
No.
Was that gap still there? Do you remember at the time of the fire?
Yes.
Coming back then to the night, do you remember whether any smoke came through the gaps that you've described under the windows in the flat?
I didn't pay attention to it. I wouldn't have noticed.
Do you know whether there was a gap under the window or anywhere around the windows in your parents' bedroom?
I don't know.
You don't? Okay. Now, moving to page 7 of your statement, you say at the I'm sorry, page 8 of your statement, at the top of the page, you describe how you spoke to a firefighter. He told me we should stay in the flat. And at the bottom of page 7, that's part of a discussion that you're having with a friend on the phone.
Yes.
And you say, he told me we should stay in the flat. He told me to stay put. I asked him how long it would take for the fire brigade to reach us, but he said he did not know. I was never told to leave the flat. I kept telling him we had 2 disabled people in the flat, and he said that he knew there were disabled people in our flat, but did not say that the firefighters were coming specifically to our flat. I do not know the identity of the firefighter I spoke with. And I know it's difficult. Do you remember roughly how long after the group had come into your flat, after your first attempt to leave, that you had that conversation?
No, because I received numerous amounts of calls from people outside the tower on that night, and the calls happened from the time we got into, everyone came into our flat until the point where I left the flat.
Yes.
For the last time, we were continuously on the phone, so there were so many conversations with various people that I can't remember what time it would have happened.
The group that had come into your flat, and were they wearing night clothes? Well, let me ask you more generally. What were they wearing? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. I can't remember what they were wearing.
Do they look like they were dressed to leave, or do they look like they just got out of bed?
I think Miriam and her mum looked as if they wanted to leave. They were ready to leave. It wasn't like, I don't think they were wearing outdoor clothes. They were wearing maybe house clothes, not something that you would wear outside normally. I think I remember Miriam's mum. She had like a large scarf that was around her. That's about all I can remember.
Right. Were they wearing anything on their feet? Do you remember?
I didn't pay attention.
No. Just going back a bit to the larger group that you saw coming up the stairs, do you remember whether anybody else in that group was dressed to leave, ready to go outside, or whether they were in their bedclothes?
From what I remember, most people were in their house clothes, but they had just put on a jumper on top, like a coat or a jumper, just to keep themselves warm. But yeah, everyone was pretty much wearing pajamas.
Right. Right. Now, moving on in your evidence, at paragraph 45, you say, this is page 8, you say the fire eventually got to our flat. It started in my parents' bedroom. I did not see it myself, but my dad informed me that the fire was in his bedroom. He had closed his bedroom door and told us not to go in. And then you go on to say, this was quite concerning as my parents' bedroom was directly in front of our front door, which was our only exit out of the flat. We stayed in the flat for between 15 and 30 minutes after that, whilst the fire was in the bedroom. I believe the bedroom window had broken and the fire had come in from outside. When we eventually left, as no one was coming to rescue us, I would think it took us about 10 to 15 minutes to get down the tower to the exit. Now, there's quite a bit in that, so I just wanted to see if I can unpack that a bit more. First of all, did you look out of the windows yourself during the time when, or after the time when your father had closed the bedroom door and said, don't go in there?
Yeah, so we looked out of the windows quite a lot. I looked towards the north side, so looking onto the academy. You could see bits of flying debris on fire, flying up, the wind taking them up. On the side of the kitchen, so towards the station, we couldn't see any fire at all. It was clear on that side.
Right. And do you remember hearing specifically Mariam El Ghouari calling 999?
Yes. I would say it was 999 that she called, because I remember she got frustrated at one point during the phone call. I think they must have asked if the fire had reached them or something, and she just shouted, yes, it's our flat is already burnt. Everything in our flat is already burnt, through the phone. So I presume it was the fire brigade that she was on the phone to.
Do you remember how many calls she made?
No, I don't remember.
Were you present? How many do you think you were present during?
I think to 999 I was present during one. The rest of the time, Miriam was on her phone pretty much the whole time. It was various phone calls to different people, so I wouldn't be able to say who she was on the phone to, but the whole time she was on the phone.
When she came off the phone on that occasion to the emergency services, did she tell you anything about what advice she'd received?
No, I don't think so, because I think halfway through that conversation, I had started walking around again. Right. So I sort of left that and I walked to a different part to see how my mum was doing. Okay.
So does that mean that she never relayed to you what advice or information she had got from her 999 call?
No, and I didn't ask either.
Okay. Now, at paragraph 50, you say, halfway down, it's the line above the end, actually. We had wet towels which we used to cover our mouths, and I also soaked my sweatshirt in water and wrapped it around my head. Do you Did you wet towels yourself?
So my father and I, both of us,
Right. Where did you go to do that?
So when we started to see the smoke coming in, we had some buckets in the flat. We filled up the buckets full of water from the kitchen sink.
Kitchen sink.
Yeah,
Right.
and we were just using the water from the buckets to. So we started to throw the water over the carpets, and then we filled up the buckets again, and we would just dip the towels into the bucket and use that.
Do you remember any problems? Sorry, let me put that a different way. Do you remember anything particular about the water pressure when you were filling up the buckets?
No, I think because it was a slightly larger bucket, we just left the tap on while we went and sourced the towels and everything.
Right.
So I didn't really pay attention to how fast it was filling up.
Okay. Do you remember any time when you or your father opened the taps and there was no water?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Personally, I was just using the bucket as a water source. It was my dad mostly that was controlling the tap.
Okay. What about your mother? Do you remember whether she worked the taps?
I don't think my mum was handling the taps. Yeah, I think she was just helping to source the towels at the time.
Yes, okay. Mr. Neda, Mr. Chairman, we've been going for another 45 minutes or so. It might be convenient.
Possibly a bit longer. But
maybe a little bit longer,
right.
yes. I'm conscious that we may have gone over our 45-minute mark.
Yes.
Is it convenient to you, Mr. Neda, that we take a break now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you all right with that? Mr. Chairman, maybe
Yes.
a short break.
I think it would be sensible to have a short break now. We'll take 10 minutes, Mr. Neda,
Sure.
if that's all right.
Okay.
Don't talk to anyone about your evidence, please,
Sure.
while you're out. And we'll come back at 12:05. Is
Okay.
that right?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Can I give the usher, please? All right, 12:05, please. Right, Mr. Neda?
Yes.
Happy to carry on?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Villett.
Mr. Neda, thank you very much for coming back to us. Can I just go back with you to one thing you told us in the last session of your evidence about the smoke coming from the smoke vents? Do you remember that discussion
Yes.
we had? Just to clarify, you say that it came from both sides. Just to be clear, could you see the smoke coming from both vents on each wall, north and south?
Yes.
You could?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, the other question is that when the ladies came into your flat, or perhaps while they were on the stairwell, did you, you mentioned, I think, that there was discussion of helicopters coming. Was that when you first saw them, or was that when you went into the flat with them?
I believe it was more when we got into the flat.
Right.
Yeah.
And was there a discussion about them going onto the roof at any time, do you think?
Yes. I think one of the Iranian ladies had mentioned that they would be, when she mentioned that they would be sending helicopters, I think my mum had mentioned to her that there's no way up for us, no way for us to get onto the roof.
Right.
It's locked.
Okay. Did you get any impression or sense of where the lady had got? I think this is Mrs. Afrasiabi, isn't it?
Yes.
Where she had got the idea of helicopters from?
Well, she had spoken to someone on the phone before coming up. She did mention that she was speaking to someone on the phone. I don't know who it was.
Right.
And then I think just the fact that the helicopters were outside the tower, were flying above the tower, probably influenced that a bit
Right.
more onto her.
Okay. Now, going back to your first witness statement. You describe your decision to leave the flat, and you do that in a number of places, but I think it's best to see it at paragraph 50 on page 9 of your statement. And just to set it in context for you, Mr. Neda, this starts on the page before at page 8 with the heading "Leaving the flat to try and escape," and paragraph 49 then describes how your mum was next to the window saying she was ready to jump rather than going through the pain of being burnt alive. And I don't want to take you through that. Paragraph 50, you say, "So in those last few minutes, when I thought there was nothing else we could do, I grabbed my mum and shouted to my dad, 'We need to leave now.' There was just so much smoke. I thought if I did not grab my mum then, at that time, we would not be able to grab her again. She was vulnerable, but she certainly could not walk down the stairs on her own due to her mobility problems. I had to do something. We had wet towels, which we used to cover our mouths, and I also soaked my sweatshirt in water and wrapped it around my head." Now, we looked at the wet towels, but I just want to look at the decision. Can you, just looking back on it now, just describe for us exactly what it was that made you make that decision?
Well, the smoke was just cornering us at that point, so we didn't have anywhere else to hide. So up until that point, we would keep on moving further and further back into the flat until the point where we got to the kitchen, which is the last place that remained smoke-free. Less smoke than everywhere else. Yeah. After that, we didn't have anywhere else to hide from the smoke.
Now, at that point, I think, we looked at this earlier, you had already had a discussion with a firefighter who told you to stay where you are
Yeah.
and that people were coming.
Yes.
How long after that conversation did you make the decision to leave that you've just described, do you think?
Probably about 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Can you tell us whether the advice that you got from the firefighter had in any way influenced your your actions before you decided to leave?
Yes, because there was a stage where my friends and family were downstairs and they were communicating directly to the firefighters who were outside the tower. And for at several points I asked if they were actually coming to get us, and the response that I had got was that they were on their way up. They told me that they had reached a certain level. I believe they he said the guy outside wasn't sure what floor that the firefighters had reached, but he assured us that they were on their way up and they would be with us soon. Especially the fact that when I told them that we had disabled people in the apartment, they said that they already know that. So I thought, okay, they're clearly thinking about us, they know we're up here, so they must be coming to get us. Right. I had no reason to disbelieve them.
No. So at the moment you made your decision, did you know or think you were now going to do something different from the advice that you got from the firefighter?
Yes. I just thought to myself, we don't have enough time to wait for them. There's just not enough time. I remember just before that, literally minutes before that, I had sent a message to someone who had lived on the 3rd floor. They weren't in the tower at the time, but they were in contact with fire brigade outside. And I had sent a message asking, is there any hope? That's the words I used, is there any hope?
Yes.
And she didn't have an answer for me. She just said, stay calm. And at that point I just thought, things aren't getting, they're not going to get here in time.
Was that Moja Habib?
Yes, that's right.
Now I think given what you've just said, perhaps we can look at your second exhibit to your second witness statement. And I'll just give the IWS reference so we can get it up on the screen. Right, it's IWS *0001134. And this exhibit is dated the 16th of October, so just 2 days ago you exhibited it. And this is, when we get to it, an extract of your WhatsApp messages with Mojda Habib. How do you pronounce her first name?
Mojda.
Mojda?
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't want to look at the first page. I'd like to pick it up at the second page of the exhibit, if we can. And before we do that, I should just say there is at the top of this extract, Mr. Chairman, the bottom of a picture which does show flame on the exterior of the tower. And again, I should just make a warning just in case anyone finds that distressing.
Yes.
Is it page 6? Right, it's page 6 of the second exhibit. That's 1134. And I think it's a part of the same IWS reference, but it's page 6 of IWS *000, page 1. Can you please go to the next page? Which is page 8, in fact. Yes, could you go to page 8, please? There we are. Now, we could pick this up at the bottom. I'm sorry, at the top of this extract. This is, just so we're clear, Mr. Neda, this is an extract from your phone?
Yes.
Where you were receiving WhatsApp messages from Mojda?
Yes.
She was outside the building, was she?
No, not herself. Her brother-in-law was outside.
Okay. And you say, and I'm interested in the timings, you say halfway down the page, our noses are full of black smoke. That's you sending her a message, is it?
Yes.
So the green is you sending her a message?
Yes.
Okay. And so we can time the black smoke round the noses that you described earlier at 01:59.
Yes.
And then you say at the bottom, we are getting worried, and this is at 02 something, and then is there any hope? 02:01. So would that be about the time when you started asking Mojda, is there any hope?
Yes.
I see.
I think that's one of the last messages I sent to her on the night.
Yes. Right. Now, how long after this do you think you made your decision to leave?
About 2 or 3 minutes after. It might have been more.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly.
Does that mean that the conversation you had with the firefighter about staying in your flat and there's someone coming for you was before 02:01? Or was it after, do you think?
I think there might have been an occasion after as well, where I had conversations on the phone.
Okay.
I don't think Mojda was the last person that I spoke to or messaged on the night.
No, and indeed, if you look down the page, it says, I'm calling, well, Mojda says, I'm calling him, he's going to call you now, and this is all at 02:02, pick up at 02:02.
I think, in that case, I think that was maybe about 15 minutes before we made the decision to leave, possibly.
Okay. So you spoke, first question, did a call come into you, which you took?
Yes, there were several calls with her brother-in-law.
Okay, and do you remember whether one of those was the call on which you were, the phone was handed to the firefighter?
Yes.
Right. Okay. That's very helpful. When you made your decision, as we've been discussing, to leave, did you have any thoughts about how you were going to get through the lobby to the stairwell?
I just remember, although I couldn't tell how hot it was that night, from when I had wet my sweater, the water was getting dry. It kept on drying up, so we had to keep re-wetting our towels and whatever we were using. So I remember I re-wetted my sweater, wrapped it around my head, and I just thought, I'm just going to take a deep breath in and hold my breath and go as far as I can.
We discussed earlier that you'd been told by, I think Mariam, or you think Mariam,
Yeah.
when she arrived in the stairwell and you met her, that there was no way through the stairs because the stairs were on fire.
Yes.
Did you have any thoughts at the time you decided to make your escape, how you were going to get through that fire that you thought was there?
I thought that there was just no other way to get out. Other than the windows, there was no other way. And being afraid of heights myself, I decided to take the other option, the only other option that was available. And I thought, if we do encounter any flames, it might be possible to go into one of the other lobbies on another floor, just before we reach the flames.
Yes.
I thought it was a better option to take than the window.
Prior to you and your mother leaving the flat, had any firefighter come up to the flat?
No.
Sure about that?
Yes.
So at the moment you open your front door to leave, can you describe for us the conditions that you immediately encountered in the lobby at that point?
So smoke just hit me, or even though we had already gone into the smoke, into the thick smoke in our hallway. When I opened the front door, even more smoke just hit me in my face. Right. I remember just closing my eyes, and I think until the point where I got into the staircase, my eyes were closed the whole time.
Right. Okay. And does that mean you couldn't actually see anything? I mean, clearly you couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
But
I think even if I would have kept my eyes open from when we had got into the smoke in our hallway, already we couldn't see anything in front of us. So even if I would have had my eyes open in the lobby area, I still wouldn't have been able to see.
Now, paragraph 52 of your statement, you say, I grabbed my mum and walked out of our flat onto the landing outside. It was pitch black and thick with smoke. I could not see a thing. And then you say the heat was greater in the lobby than in the flat.
Yeah.
How much, can you tell how much hotter it was in the lobby than in the flat?
Well, every time I think the best I could explain it is every time I would take a breath in, I could feel my throat and my lungs burning. I could feel it, literally.
Right. But so you did inhale the smoke in the lobby,
yes.
Did you? Right. Could you feel the heat of the air or smoke on your skin?
Not really, no.
Right.
I remember just before I got out, I was wearing a leather jacket. I took that off, and I was just wearing a polo shirt at the time with jeans, and
right.
I think the heat was the least of my worries at that time. I wasn't paying much attention to it.
Okay. So, before I leave it, leaving aside the lungs, did you feel any change in the ambient air temperature as you went out into the lobby at all?
No, not really.
Okay. And you've told us, I think, earlier this morning that you weren't focusing on the noise that the smoke vent system was working.
Yeah, no, I wasn't.
Okay. Now, your mother has given us a statement, and I know we'll be giving evidence later today, that describes in her statement that there was dark grey, shiny smoke. She says it was shiny. And she says it looked like glitter. Do you remember that?
No,
Okay.
I can't remember that.
What physical effect, apart from the burning in the lungs and your throat, I think you've described, what other physical effect did that smoke in the lobby when you went into it have on you?
I was out of breath. I think just out of breath. Yeah.
Okay. Were you sick?
No, like I was coughing. Every couple of seconds I was coughing. But I wasn't sick, no.
What about your mum? Do you remember what physical effect it had on her?
She was coughing quite a lot. She was struggling to talk. I remember halfway down the stairs, she went unconscious for a small period of time. I can't remember when she regained consciousness.
Do you remember whether she was sick?
No, I can't remember.
Okay. How long do you think it took you to cross the lobby?
The lobby, probably about a maximum of 20 seconds. it was quite quick because I was holding my breath. I was just trying to get through as fast as I can. So it was quite quick until we got to the staircase.
Right. Now, you had your mother with you.
Yes.
How were you holding her? Well, sorry, were you holding her? First
Yes.
of all? Can you describe how?
I put, from what I remember, I put her left arm around over my shoulder, across my shoulder. I put my right arm around her hip area, and I was I had my left arm holding her arm, and just carrying her weight on my shoulders.
Right. I see. And then you get to the stairwell door. Do you remember whether it was open or closed?
I believe it was closed. The 23rd floor, I believe, was closed.
Right. And did you push it open?
Yes, with my shoulder.
With your shoulder, okay. Do you remember any pressure that you encountered in opening the door?
No, I can't remember any.
Okay. Do you remember whether the door closed behind you once you got into the stairwell?
I think it did. The doors were quite heavy, so they would close automatically after.
Okay.
So I think it did, but it was too dark to see.
Right.
I couldn't tell if it had closed after us.
I should have asked you this question a minute ago, but when you left your flat, did you or your mother close the door behind you?
No, we left it open.
Left it open.
I remember, because I thought my dad was following behind us, when I opened the door, our door would stay open unless you closed it physically. It would stay open.
Right.
I just left it open thinking my dad's going to follow us, and we just ran towards the staircase.
Yes. I think your door didn't have a self-closer on it.
Not at the time of the fire. When they fitted the door, it did have one.
Yes.
I think within about 1 week of the door being fitted, it broke, so we weren't able to close our door. We called the TMO, someone came and they took off, it had like a little chain towards the middle, which would close the door. It would make the door quite heavy as well.
Right.
So they took that off. They said that they would replace it, but they never came back
Right.
to do that.
Did you ever ask them to come back?
No, I think we just left it.
Right.
I think we were happy with the door being a lot lighter because my mum was not able to open and close that door due to her condition. It was too heavy for her. So once they took it off, the door was very light. You could open and close it very easily.
Yes, thank you. When you get in, just going back then into the stairs, when you get into the stairs, do you remember whether the smoke was the same or different from what you'd encountered in the lobby when you'd come through it?
So it was less intense. It was still thick enough to not be able to see anything. If you lowered yourself down, you would be able to see the floor. But if you're standing up, it was just thick black smoke, which you couldn't see anything from.
Did you? You say you had a sweater over your head. Was it actually over your head so it obscured your vision?
No. So I tied the sleeves of the sweater around my. I think it was like just around my nose and my mouth, and I was biting onto it, sort of sucking up the water from the sweater. But I still had my eyes open fully. Like it was just covering up to my eyes and around, so not over my head.
No. Could you see your feet when you got into the stairs?
If I lowered myself down, yes, but not if I was standing up.
Okay. Could you see the banisters when you put your arm out?
No, I couldn't see it. I was feeling it.
Did you see the emergency lighting on in the stairs?
No, it was completely dark.
It's completely dark. You couldn't even see any lights?
No.
Could you smell the smoke or taste the smoke?
Yeah, it was very sour tasting. Every breath that I took, I could just taste it.
Right.
Taste the sourness of it.
Was it the same taste and smell that you'd experienced when you'd smelt and tasted it in the flat?
Slightly different. So it was more of more acidic. I don't know if it felt more acidic.
You say it felt more acidic. Which
Yeah.
part of your body could you feel the acid nature of the smoke?
I could feel it in my throat and inside my nose,
Okay.
and the lining of my nose.
And so when you say it felt more acidic, what does that feel like?
So it felt like it was just burning away inside.
And
Yeah.
was that more or was that different from when you were in the flat?
So when I was in the flat, although I could smell it, it wasn't as intense. Yeah, it was in the stairwell. It was very intense. So even if you took a very small breath in, it would feel like you've taken like a whole gulp of air.
And what colour was the smoke in the stairwell?
It was black.
Same.
Yeah.
Was it the same?
Yeah.
Same colour. And did you notice any change in the temperature, the ambient temperature in the stairwell compared with the lobby?
No, I don't think. I don't think I was paying much attention to the temperature. I think I had so many things on my mind at the time that I didn't even think about it.
No. Now, you describe in your statement from page 9, paragraph 54, onwards to the next page, page 10 of paragraph 61, your detailed description of your descent of the stairs with your mother. And I think your mother was... How were you assisting your mother down? Can you describe how you were holding her?
Yeah, so the whole time she had one arm over my shoulder, so going across from one side of my shoulder to the other side. I was holding her around the hip area, so had my arm around her, and holding her weight up as much as I could. I remember I think I had one hand on the banister just to feel my way around.
Right. So you were taking her weight, basically?
Yeah.
Most of it.
My mum wouldn't have been able to go down the stairs as fast as we needed to. She takes, I think, the time it would take a normal person to go up an entire flight of stairs. My mum would go up one step in that amount of time. So she wouldn't have been able to do it on her own. I had to take the weight.
Now, you describe this descent, as I say, in detail to paragraph 61, when you then describe walking past a floor where you'd seen an open landing.
Yes.
And then going in, or going up, I think, to find some clean air. Before you did that, did you, on your descent down to that point, notice any change in the smoke density in the stairwell?
I think we could see the floor a bit better. It was still quite dark up, and still very difficult to breathe in the smoke. But you could see. I think we could see a bit of the floor at that
Right.
stage.
Did you notice any change in the temperature at any point during this descent, up to the point at which you see the
No.
floor with clean air? No.
No.
Did you come across any firefighters in the stairwell during that descent?
No. There were hoses during the descent, but no firefighters themselves. it looked as though the hoses had just been placed there. I don't think they had been used because they were still flat.
Right.
But yeah, no firefighters at all.
And what about the floor? Was it wet or dry?
I think it was dry. Yeah, I don't think it was wet because I remember at one point we tripped over, and when I had touched the floor, I couldn't feel any wetness.
Yes. Do you recall any point in your descent when, just perhaps for a few floors, it got hotter?
No.
Do you remember seeing any other occupants of the building coming down the stairs?
Not coming down, no. Any person that we came across was already dead on the stairs, or they were about to pass away.
Yeah, and you described that in your statement. Can I then take you to paragraph 61 of your statement on page 10? And you say, as we got about halfway down the tower, I remember walking past a floor where I'd seen an open landing door. I do not know which floor this was on, but because we could not breathe where we'd gotten to on the stairwell, we went back up one staircase to try and find some air. First of all, you say about halfway down the tower. Were you able to number the floors as you went down?
No. I was just guessing from the amount of steps it felt like I had gone down. I was just guessing.
Okay, I see. Was there any point in this descent up to this point where you could begin to see the electric lights in the stairs?
Only when we got to about the 4th floor. That's when we saw light.
Right. Was that because you... Well, could you see the light fittings which weren't illuminated, or was it because of the smoke?
No, it was because of the smoke. I didn't... Once we got to the 4th floor, I still wasn't paying attention to anything that was on the walls or any fittings on the walls. I was just thinking to get myself out as quick as possible.
Sure. Now, at this point, you say you walked past a floor where you'd seen an open landing door. Do you know why or what was keeping the door open? Why it was open?
There wasn't anything to keep the door open, so there was nothing blocking the door.
Right. And when you went past it, did you look into the floor?
No, I didn't look in. So the way I had come about to see the door was we had tripped, and whilst on the floor, because it was a lot clearer down under at the bottom area, I just noticed the door was a bit open, like halfway open. But at that point, I was still trying to get out. So we just continued to go down. I think it was just the one flight of stairs that we went down.
Right.
Yeah, and I realized, like, I just can't breathe anymore. Because at that point, I think my sweater had fallen off, and I couldn't get it back. So I just needed some sort of air. And at that point, I was thinking, if we go back up one, at least the door is open. Maybe we might find a flat door which is open and get to a window, get some air. I wasn't expecting to find air inside the lobby.
So you then went up that half flight, or single flight from the little half landing to that floor. Did you go onto that lobby floor with your mother?
Yes.
How far into the lobby did you get?
So we sat down. Well, we laid down by where the air vents are on the wall in between. So in between flat 2 and flat 3
So
of
the south
floor.
side of the lobby.
Yeah. So we laid down there
Right.
just for about a minute or so.
Right. And how much clear air? Well, was there any clear air there?
It seemed a lot clearer. Like it was still smoky, but you could at least see. You could see. We could see each other.
Right.
And I could see like the condition of my mum. I could see how she was at that stage.
And you say you laid down by where the air vents are on the wall in between. Were those the air vents nearest the ground?
Yes.
Was there air coming out of them?
I didn't pay attention. I just saw the clear air around it, and
Right.
I just went
Okay.
there.
And how long do you think you spent there before progressing on down again?
I don't think it was more than a minute. Yeah.
And was that enough for you to get your breath
Yeah.
back and be able to start to breathe normally?
Yeah, it was just enough for me to feel like I could carry on a few more flights of stairs, and then at that point I thought maybe I might be able to do this on every few floors which I go down.
And then you set off down again. How long, or how far after leaving that lobby to go down again did you encounter your first firefighter?
I think maybe 2 floors, 2-3 floors down.
And when you encountered that first firefighter, can you describe for us the smoke in the stairwell at that point?
So we still couldn't see. I only knew there was a firefighter there from the sounds I was hearing. So I could hear the breathing apparatus working. And I just knew it was a firefighter, but I couldn't see them.
Right. You don't know, or you couldn't see that they had torches?
No, and I don't think they saw us either, because it felt as though they were ready to go past us, and it was only that I grabbed one of them on the chest, and I think that's when they realized there's someone here.
Yes. How many in the, maybe you don't know, but how many in the group of firefighters did you think there were? As a matter of impression.
I'm pretty sure there was only 2.
Right. You don't know where they were on their way up to?
No.
Now, at paragraph 64 of your statement, you say the firefighter I grabbed was male, that he was with a female firefighter. He told me to grab hold of his arm, and the female firefighter helped my mum. I told him my dad and 4 others were trapped in flat 205 on the top floor. The firefighter took out his notebook and wrote down the flat number and the number of people who were trapped. They both helped us down the stairwell. I told my mum to hold my hand and to stay close to me. The female firefighter was helping my mum, and I was scared that she would get to the point where she could not carry my mum, and I was not going to leave my mum in the stairwell. I held onto her hand tightly. At that point, you say, I told him my dad and others were trapped in flat 205 on the top floor. Did you realise your father had not come down with you?
Yeah, because while we were coming down, my mum, on several occasions, she shouted my dad's name in the hope to get a response to see he's behind us. But we had no response, so we could only assume that he was still in the flat.
Now, you... did you... You say the firefighter took out his notebook and wrote down the flat number.
Yeah.
and the number of people who were trapped. Could he see enough to be able to do that?
So from what I remember, we got down quite low. So we were, I think, pretty much sitting on the stairwell, and I think he tried to look for the number on the floor, and he was to see what floor we were on, and he couldn't see that. He asked me if I knew what floor we were on. I told him I don't know either.
Right. Did he have a torch with him? Do you remember?
I can't remember.
Do you remember how he could? I see. So if you got down low, does that mean
Yeah.
that
So,
near the ground you could?
Yeah,
you
near the
did have
ground it's a
visibility?
lot less smoke. So at that point we could see the ground.
I see.
It's a lot clearer down.
And you were on the stairwell, were you, when he wrote this down?
Yes.
Okay. Did he say what would be done about those who were still up in your flat?
No, I can't remember if he said anything.
Those two firefighters then accompanied you and your mother down to the bottom of the tower.
Yes.
Do you know what that firefighter did with the piece of paper or the information that you'd given him after that?
I don't know. Once we got to about I think it was the second floor or the third floor, they handed us over to other firefighters who were there. There was a big group of firefighters there, and I don't know where they went themselves.
No. Did you see or know what that firefighter who had written down the details did at that point at that
No.
point of handover? You didn't?
No, we were just rushed out of the building.
Now, if you go to paragraph 67 of your statement, still on the same page, you say, I think it took us approximately 10 to 15 minutes to get out of the tower, but I do not really know for sure. Just pausing there, does that mean from the moment you left your flat
Yes.
to the moment you left?
Yes, that's right.
And you say, when we got out of the tower, I told the fire brigade that there were still people in our flat at the top, as 4 ladies had come into the flat and my dad was still there. Where were you when you informed the fire brigade that there were people still in your flat?
I think I was. The first time I mentioned it was when, just as I got out of the main entrance, I think I just turned my head to the firefighter that was helping me get away from the tower. I told him, and then after they put us on a grass area by Station Walk, and there were a couple of firefighters that kept on coming in to check up on us, and I mentioned it to him as well.
Did any firefighter tell you what was going to be done about those who had been left behind in your flat?
No, they just said they're going to try their best to help everyone. I think they were telling us, don't worry, just worry about yourself.
Right. At paragraph 81, you describe how you were treated. This is on page 13 of your, page 14 of your statement. You say that you were treated and were given oxygen masks and blankets. Were you treated as soon as you left the tower, or did you have to wait to be treated? Do you remember?
I had to wait. So once we got out of the tower, they put us onto the grass area and Station Walk, and they gave oxygen to my mum. She was in a worse condition than me. At that point, I didn't really feel like I needed any help, or I felt, other than being exhausted, I felt fine. And I didn't really, no one really came to me to see if I needed anything, or if I was doing okay. I remember there was one point where I felt a little bit out of breath. My mum gave her oxygen to me for, I think, about 20, 30 seconds. I used it and I put it back all around her. And then after we got moved by closer to the station, Latimer Road station, and they had set up like a triage point where the ambulance was checking everyone, and they were just putting numbers on everyone's hand depending on how severe their condition was.
Yes. And in your statement at paragraph 83, if we just look down at that, you say you were taken to hospital, and when you got to hospital, I was pretty bad. It's paragraph 83, second line. You say, I was pretty bad, I couldn't breathe. My airway was getting blocked, and when I told the doctors that I could not breathe, they checked me over and rushed me in and put me into an induced coma, as you say.
Yes.
How soon after you left the tower did you think your condition deteriorated in that way?
So, up until the point where I got to the hospital, I was still feeling fine. I walked into the ambulance on my own feet. I didn't need a stretcher or anything. I walked into the hospital. I think it's after sort of I started calming down and the adrenaline had gone, is when I started to feel it.
Yes.
It must have been, I think, after 9 o'clock in the morning when I got put into the induced coma.
Yes. When you say in your statement in the previous paragraph that you've been waiting outside the tower for up to 3 hours, or maybe 3 hours,
Yeah.
do you know why were you waiting for that long?
I think everyone was waiting quite long, and then to begin with, they started to take the higher priority patients in first. So there were quite a lot of ambulances, but all of them were being used. So each ambulance was taking about 2 patients at a time, rather than 1. I think they just saw that I was a lower priority. I mean, they even took my mum a couple of hours before they took me, and they wouldn't let me go with my mum because they needed the space in the ambulance for someone else.
Sure. Thank you. Just one more question about the way down. I just wanted to ask you. You described how on the way down you saw a door open,
Yes.
and then you went to it for some clean air. Do you remember whether on your way down you saw any other stairwell doors open?
Yes. I remember that hoses that the fire brigade had left out were holding doors open at parts of the tower. It wasn't on every floor, but on some floors where you could see,
Right.
it was the fire brigade's hoses that were holding the doors open.
Right. And how many doors do you think were propped open by hoses?
I would say I saw about 3 doors open, but there were several floors that we had gone past where I couldn't see the doors, so I wouldn't be able to tell if they were open or not.
Right. Apart from the hoses being used to prop doors open or propping doors open, were there any other doors into the stairwell that you saw on your way down, which were open but were not propped open?
I can't remember. No, I wouldn't be able to say definitely.
Mr. Neda, you've been extremely patient, and I'm extremely grateful to you. I've come to the end of my questions. What I'm going to do now is to ask the chairman to rise for a few minutes, just to see if there are any other questions I need to ask you or other people want me to ask you.
Okay.
And then I'm going to invite you to come back. Mr. Chairman, is that convenient? I'm
Yes.
conscious that it's 5 to 1,
No,
and so we should have a short break.
I'm
but-
sure Mr. Neda would like to finish his evidence before we break for lunch,
Yes.
if he can. So, yes, we'll break now for 5 minutes while Mr. Millet gathers his thoughts, and then we'll see if there are any further questions.
Okay, sure.
Is that right? So you go to the usher and don't talk to anyone about your evidence,
Okay.
please, again, while you're out of the room. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. I'm going to say 1:05, Mr. Millet.
Very well.
Well, do you think you need less time than that?
No, I think 5 past is right. Otherwise, it's 3 minutes.
Well,
and that's not
otherwise
enough.
it's very difficult
Yes,
to time.
quite.
Yes,
Exactly.
1:05, please. Well, I imagine one or two questions, Mr. Millis.
There are, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, yes. Not very many, but some.
I think there are a couple of questions at least.
No problem.
Yes,
Mr. Neda, thank you very much for coming back. Just one or two,
Sure.
which probably means 4 or 5. But bear
No
with
problem.
me. First of all, do you remember, did you have sliding doors in your flat between the kitchen and the living room?
Yes.
You did. What were they made of? Do you know?
I believe it was wood.
Wood. Were they open on the night of the fire, or were they shut?
We used to keep them open all the time.
Right. Before you and your mother left the flat, do you remember whether there was a conversation with Mariam and the Al-Afrasiabis about the plan, what you were going to do?
So I had shouted that, to my dad that we need to leave. My dad had then gone up to everyone. At that point, everyone was in one small space because the smoke had cornered us in. And I believe he was explaining the plan to them. Only thing I could think of was to grab my mum, make sure she's ready, and take her out.
Did you have a discussion with the Afrasiabis?
No, I didn't.
What about Mariam? About the plan?
I think I just mentioned in general to everyone that we need to leave now. That's about it. We didn't have any discussions. We didn't have time for discussion.
And do you remember where you last saw them in the flat? Where were they in the flat when you last saw them?
So everyone was crowded around the kitchen. My dad was more towards the kitchen sink, which was by the entrance of the hallway if you go through the kitchen. He was there. I think the last thing I saw him doing was just re-wetting the towels in preparation to leave.
And do you remember where the Afrasiabi sisters were at that time?
I believe one of them was sitting on top of the worktop, which is directly by the kitchen window. So we had a worktop which covered that section. One of them was sitting on top of there, and the other one was standing by her.
By her. Do you remember who was sitting and who was standing?
No, I can't remember which way around it was.
And where was Mariam at that time? Do you remember?
She was with her mum. I think she was, from what I remember, she was at the, so where the sliding doors would slide to close off the kitchen from the living room. I believe she was there.
She's still on the sofa with her mum?
No, not on the sofa.
Not on the sofa?
No, she was off the sofa.
Right.
So literally where the kitchen and the living room is divided, standing there.
Right. And what about Mariam's mum? They were together, were they?
They were together, yes.
Okay. The occupants of flat 202 were a young Italian couple. Did you know them?
I didn't know them. I had seen them on 1 or 2 occasions. Just said hi. They were fairly new to the tower, and I only saw them on the 2 occasions quite early in the morning while we were going to work. I presume they were going to work as well. Right.
They were called Gottardi. They were called
I didn't know them by name.
You didn't know them by name?
No.
Right.
I only learnt of their names after the fire.
Okay. Did you see them on the night of the fire at all?
No, I didn't.
You didn't? when you got down and told the firefighter about those who had been left in your flat, did you mention to the firefighter that there were also others on the top floor who needed rescuing?
I didn't know. I wasn't sure if there was anyone left on the top floor because we stayed in our flat for a considerable amount of time. People from the other flats could have left. They could have. I didn't know what they had done, and when we left, we didn't see anyone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to jump around. When you were in the flat, and the lady, I think it was Mrs. Afrasiabi, was discussing the helicopter, I think, as you told us before, was there a discussion about breaking down the gate to the roof?
I can't remember that discussion happening.
No. Paragraph 18 of your statement, I'm sorry to ask you to go back to this. You actually refer to hearing noises from the vent on Fridays and wouldn't be sorted out until the following Monday. Does that mean that you'd go to work on Monday and come back and it was fixed, or was it fixed by Monday? In other words, over the weekend?
No, it would be fixed while we're at work. So when we come back, we just notice that it's not making the noise anymore. Right.
Does that mean you had a sleepless weekend?
Yes, yeah. I think what seemed to be quite common is the TMO wouldn't really send anyone to do repairs unless they had more than one complaint. So several people would have to complain before they actually took action.
Right. Did you go to your neighbours to...
not regarding the vents, but regarding other problems. Yeah.
I was interested in the vents. Finally, Mr. Neda, and it is finally, I've read in your statement that you are, or were at the time of the fire, a second Dan black belt taekwondo champion.
Yes.
Does that, would the chairman take from that you are or were at the time of the fire, a physically fit young man?
Yes, I would say my fitness levels were above average. Yeah.
And with that, Mr. Neda, it only remains for me to thank you enormously for your help that you've given to the inquiry in your written statements and this morning. I know it's jolly difficult to come here and talk about the night, but we are extremely grateful to you, and you've been extremely valuable to us. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for having me.
No further questions, Mr. Chairman. No. No further questions.
All right. Well, Mr. Neda...
So maybe just interrupt for a moment. Mr. Howard's just going to have a word with us.
All right.
Right.
Sorry, I was just about to say you could go, but you can't.
Nick, I should have picked the cue up from the chairman, actually, rather than from Mr. Howe, and I apologise. I would say...
I think Mr. Howe's only anticipated what I was going to say.
He was. And there is a final question, Mr. Neda, and I'm sorry, I was more interested in your physical fitness than this final question, but I will ask it anyway. Is there anything about the events of the night, over and above what's in your statement, or statements, and over and above what you've told us today, about what you saw, heard, smelt, observed on the night, that you think it's important for the chairman to know?
I think there is something which I've prepared, and I will try and get it across as best as I can. So, having been in the fire that night and not knowing what was going on outside or on the other floors of the tower, and having heard the testimony of the firefighters, I feel that the residents were fatally let down. Having been in contact with the firefighters outside while I was inside the tower, I was on several occasions told that they were on their way to get us, and I feel that this was false hope. And I feel it's the false hope which prevented quite a number of people from escaping the tower that night. So the image that we had being in the tower was that the building was swarmed with firefighters, enough for everyone to have some assistance, not just few people that were on the lower floors to get the assistance. I feel that if we were told the truth, if even after the point where the firefighters knew that they wouldn't be able to reach those that were on the upper floors, if they would have just told us that there's nothing we can do whatever you can, at least people would have had time to make the decision for themselves to get out or to stay in the building. And it's I feel that it was too late for them to make any decision once they were trapped. I mean, even if those who were trapped beyond the point of having any way to escape, if they knew that the firefighters were not coming to get them, or if they didn't have any way of escape, they could have at least prepared themselves for what was to come. So they could have at least prayed. If they're a religious person, they could have at least prepared themselves for the pain that they were about to go through. So I think that's quite important, and I think the key word in it is false hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neda. Well, Mr. Neda, thank you very much for all your evidence. And I repeat my thanks to you, as I said before, for your coming here today and assisting the chairman with our investigations.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'd like to add my thanks, Mr. Neda. You've given your evidence very clearly and carefully, and for that we are very grateful. It was obviously a very horrendous experience. And if I may, I'd just like to express my admiration for the way in which you acted that evening. And I'm sure your father would be very proud of you.
Thank you very much. Means a lot.
Thank you for coming. And that's probably a convenient point, isn't it, Mr. Millett?
Mr. Chairman, it is, yes. And we move to our next witness, who will be Flora Neda, Farhad's mother.
Yes.
At whatever time you
want. I
convenient.
think we would all benefit from having the usual hour to take lunch. So shall I say 2:20?
2:20.
Yes,
very good.
2:20. Thank you.